It began as a hushed conversation behind Kensington Palace walls, one that aides tried to downplay and courtiers quickly silenced. But the look on Princess Catherine's face as she exited that private meeting said everything the palace couldn't. Something extraordinary had happened, and it involved a royal honor so historic, so symbolically powerful, that many believed it would never leave Camilla's orbit. What started as a quiet rumor soon erupted into a constitutional storm. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Reports suggest the meeting had been arranged with unusual care, not as a routine briefing, not as another polite exchange between senior royals, but as something heavier, something sealed in silence before anyone, beyond the inner circle, could understand its meaning. King Charles was said to have entered the discussion with senior constitutional advisors, already aware that the decision before him could reshape the quiet balance of influence inside the monarchy. Catherine, according to palace whispers, was informed before many senior figures had even been told the matter was active. That alone set nerves on edge. Because this was not about flowers, patronages, or ceremonial smiles. This was about the historic Irish seal, an honor wrapped in centuries of authority, state symbolism, and royal trust. For years, many assumed such a mark would remain connected to Camilla, a reflection of her position beside the king and her place in the royal order after the coronation. Yet suddenly, quietly, and with devastating precision, that assumption appeared to collapse. Insiders described the secrecy as unusual even by palace standards. Aides who might normally soften the edges of a decision reportedly stayed silent. Courtiers who might have leaked hints offered nothing. And in that silence the question grew sharper. Why Catherine, and why now? Some suggested Charles was looking beyond the present tensions and toward the future crown. Others whispered that the king, weakened by private pressures and public responsibility, had begun making choices that protected the institution long after his own reign. But the most explosive part was not simply Catherine's elevation. It was Camilla's apparent exclusion from a moment many believed had once been destined for her alone. That single detail turned a ceremonial reassignment into something far more dangerous. A signal, a warning, perhaps even a quiet transfer of confidence. And as media figures began linking the decision to succession planning, one truth became impossible to ignore: the palace had not merely handed Catherine an honor, it had placed her at the center of a royal future still being written in secrecy. But the seal itself was far more than a ceremonial gift. It carried a history that stretched back through generations of monarchs, making Charles's decision all the more shocking. Long before palace rivalries dominated headlines, the Irish seal stood as one of the monarchy's most treasured symbols of authority, a relic of power, continuity, and royal trust. For decades, it occupied a place few questioned, and even fewer dared challenge. It was never treated as a simple object resting inside royal archives. It carried the weight of old promises, ancient loyalties, and the quiet machinery of the crown, the kind of symbol that did not need to speak, because everyone inside the institution already understood what it meant. Reports suggest that its history had always placed it close to the heart of royal confidence, connecting monarch after monarch through a chain of duty that stretched beyond personal preference. That was why the possibility of Catherine receiving it landed with such force. It was not decoration. It was recognition. It was trust made visible. For years, many inside royal circles believed Camilla would eventually become the natural custodian of that legacy. After the coronation, her place beside Charles appeared stronger, more settled, almost untouchable. Royal historians often describe such ceremonial honors as marks of extraordinary favor, the kind bestowed only when a monarch wants to send a message without issuing a public declaration. And that was exactly what made this moment so explosive. Because amid Charles's health concerns, private pressures, and the growing need to secure the monarchy's next chapter, the seal suddenly became more than a historic relic. It became a test of direction. Would the crown lean into the present court around Charles, or would it begin preparing for the future shaped by William and Catherine? That question cut through the palace with chilling speed. The seal's connection to constitutional tradition meant its reassignment could never be dismissed as harmless symbolism. In royal life, symbols are weapons when placed in the right hands. They declare confidence. They reveal hierarchy. They expose who is trusted and who is merely tolerated. And if Catherine had been chosen over expectations that once surrounded Camilla, then Charles had not simply honored his daughter-in-law, he had drawn a line through the old assumptions that had governed the court since the sun-drenched coronation of 2023. The deeper insiders looked, the more significant the decision seemed. Every ceremonial duty attached to the seal, every archival connection, every past association with royal authority made the reported transfer feel less like kindness and more like strategy. It suggested that Charles, despite his weakened position, was still capable of a surgical move when the future of the crown demanded it. And for Camilla, that possibility carried a sharper sting. The honor many thought was waiting for her may have been quietly redirected before she could claim it. Yet as respected as the seal was, the real drama began when whispers emerged that someone had been positioning herself to receive it long before the official announcement. For years, palace watchers believed the outcome was already decided. If the Irish seal were ever reassigned, many assumed it would naturally pass into Camilla's sphere of influence. That assumption became so widespread that few even considered another possibility. After the coronation, Camilla's ceremonial presence had grown stronger, and every new honor around her seemed to feed the same quiet belief that the old doubts had been buried, that her place beside Charles had become secure, and that certain symbols of authority would naturally move toward her without resistance. Reports suggest some courtiers treated the matter almost like unfinished business, not a question of if, but when. The seal, with all its historic weight, appeared to fit that story perfectly. It was dignified, rare, and wrapped in the kind of royal mystery that could strengthen a queen's position without a single public speech. Senior commentators had helped deepen that expectation. Whenever discussions turned to ceremonial power, royal confidence, or the legacy of Charles's reign, Camilla's name often hovered close to the conversation. Catherine, by contrast, was rarely placed at the center of this particular artifact. She was admired, respected, and increasingly viewed as the future of the monarchy, but the Irish seal seemed different. It belonged, many thought, to the immediate court of the king, not the next generation waiting beyond him. And because royal narratives are often shaped by repetition, the assumption hardened into something that felt almost official. Palace circles began speaking as if the decision had already been quietly settled. The public, watching Camilla's influence expand after the sun-drenched coronation of 2023, had little reason to imagine that Charles might suddenly turn the direction elsewhere. But inside the monarchy, nothing is ever truly settled until the final instruction is given. That was the danger hidden beneath the silence. The same palace that allowed one expectation to grow could, with one private decision, dismantle it. And that is why the first whispers of Charles's alternative plan caused such unease. Because if Catherine had been chosen, then the king was not simply changing the recipient of a royal honor. He was challenging the story that had been built around Camilla for years. He was forcing insiders to ask whether her influence had reached its limit. He was revealing that ceremonial authority could still be redirected toward duty, future stability, and the line of succession. The shock did not come from the seal alone. It came from the collapse of certainty. A role many believed Camilla would inherit had suddenly become a symbol of Catherine's rising trust. And when those alternative plans finally surfaced, they revealed a decision that appeared to overturn years of expectations in a single stroke. Then came the moment that changed everything. Behind closed doors, amid growing concerns about the future stability of the monarchy, King Charles reportedly authorized a decision that few insiders saw coming, and even fewer were prepared to accept. It was not presented as a public spectacle, not wrapped in loud celebration, and not softened with the usual palace language designed to protect every wounded ego. It moved quietly, almost coldly, through the private channels of the crown, where the most serious choices are made long before the world hears a single word. Reports suggest constitutional advisors had been involved in confidential discussions, weighing not only the history of the Irish seal, but the message its reassignment would send at a time when Charles's reign carried both dignity and strain. Catherine's selection as recipient and symbolic custodian changed the entire meaning of the honor. This was not simply a reward for loyalty. It was a declaration of confidence in the future. In palace language, such decisions are rarely accidental. They are built like walls, word by word, signature by signature, until the final result becomes impossible to undo. And if the reports are accurate, Charles framed the move around continuity, stability, and future leadership, the very pillars that have become urgent as questions surrounding the monarchy's next chapter grow louder. The king may have appeared physically worn by the demands of the crown, but this decision suggested that his judgment remained sharp enough to reshape the royal hierarchy with a single devastating act. Courtiers were reportedly stunned by the timing. Some had expected delay, others had expected compromise. Many believed the matter would be handled later, perhaps when the atmosphere around the court was calmer and the emotional risk smaller. But Charles did not wait. That was what made the decision feel so explosive. It arrived at the precise moment when every royal signal was being studied, every private movement interpreted, every honor treated like a clue in a larger struggle for influence. Senior figures described the move as highly significant because it placed Catherine not beside the story of the future crown, but directly inside it. The wider implications were impossible to ignore. If Catherine now held an honor many believed had been quietly associated with Camilla's future ceremonial standing, then Charles had shifted more than an artifact. He had shifted gravity. He had strengthened William and Catherine's line of authority while raising difficult questions about how far Camilla's influence could truly reach. For supporters, it was a masterstroke of duty over court politics. For critics, it was a brutal reminder that in monarchy, affection and access do not always decide legacy. But while supporters celebrated the move as a vote of confidence in Catherine, others inside royal circles reportedly viewed it very differently. The reaction was immediate. Within hours, royal observers, commentators, and palace insiders were scrambling to understand what Charles's decision truly meant. Because beneath the ceremonial language lay a far deeper question. Who now held the king's trust? Reports suggest the palace was not united in its response. Some saw Catherine's selection as a long overdue recognition of her discipline, patience, and quiet service to the crown. Others, however, were said to be unsettled by the speed of the move, especially because it appeared to ignore expectations that had surrounded Camilla for years. In royal life, disappointment is rarely spoken plainly. It travels through silence, delayed statements, careful wording, and the sudden disappearance of warmth from rooms where loyalty was once assumed. Supporters of Catherine framed the decision as both elegant and necessary. To them, the Irish seal represented more than an honor. It represented confidence in a woman who had endured pressure without turning it into spectacle. Catherine had built her position slowly, with restraint, duty, and steadiness, and that made the reported transfer feel like a powerful reward for loyalty under strain. But critics asked a sharper question. Why had established expectations been pushed aside so quietly? Why had a symbol so closely linked to royal favor been redirected at a moment when Charles's reign was already under intense emotional and public pressure? Those questions turned the announcement into something combustible. The comparisons began almost instantly. Catherine and Camilla were no longer being discussed simply as two senior women of the monarchy. They were being measured as symbols of two different royal futures. Camilla represented the present court around Charles, a complicated triumph built after years of public resistance. Catherine represented continuity, youth, and the next reign waiting in the distance. That contrast gave the decision its political charge. Every commentator dissected the timing, every insider examined the wording, and every palace watcher looked for signs of who had gained ground and who had quietly lost it. Public fascination only deepened the tension. To ordinary observers, the story sounded like a ceremonial surprise, but inside the royal machine, ceremonial surprises can carry the force of a verdict. Honors decide access, access shapes influence, influence becomes legacy. And if Charles had chosen Catherine when many expected Camilla, then the king may have revealed where he believed the monarchy's safest future truly rested. The Irish seal had become a mirror, reflecting not just affection but strategy, hierarchy, and the fragile emotional politics of a family that can never fully separate private pain from public duty. Yet, the greatest significance of the decision may not have been about the present at all. It may have been about preparing for a very different future. Over the past decade, Catherine's royal journey has transformed from quiet support to central leadership. And according to many observers, the Irish seal may represent the clearest signal yet that her role inside the institution is entering an entirely new chapter. For years, she moved carefully through royal life, choosing restraint where others chased attention, choosing discipline where others exposed grievance, and choosing service even when silence cost her personally. That patience has become part of her power. It did not arrive loudly, it gathered slowly, year after year, until even those who once underestimated her began to see that Catherine was no longer merely standing beside the crown. She was helping hold it steady. Since becoming Princess of Wales, her responsibilities have carried a different weight. Every appearance, every message, every act of public duty has been watched not simply as the work of a senior royal, but as a preview of the monarchy's future character. Reports suggest Charles has increasingly viewed Catherine as a stabilizing force at a time when the institution needs calm more than spectacle. That is why the Irish seal matters so deeply. If its reported transfer is understood as a mark of confidence, then it places Catherine in a lineage of women who did not just marry into royal history, they shaped it. Future queens before her understood that influence inside the monarchy rarely depends on volume. It depends on trust, endurance, and the ability to make duty feel human. Catherine's public support has only strengthened that perception. To many, she represents continuity without coldness, tradition without distance, and dignity without arrogance. Those qualities have become essential as the monarchy faces pressure from every direction. Questions over health, succession, relevance, and unity. In that context, the seal becomes more than a historic honor. It becomes a signal that Catherine's steadiness is no longer just admired. It is being formally recognized, quietly elevated, and woven into the story of what comes next. But this rise has not been without suffering. Behind the polished language of royal duty lies the heavier truth of expectation. Catherine has had to carry public fascination, private strain, family tension, and the constant burden of being compared with women who came before her. Yet that is precisely why the reported decision was so powerful. It suggests that endurance has become authority. It suggests that the palace sees in Catherine not a temporary figure of popularity, but a cornerstone of the crown's survival. And if Charles has chosen to place such a symbol in her hands, then the monarchy may already be preparing the public for a future where her role is not secondary but central. But even that interpretation leads to an even larger question, one that reaches beyond Catherine, Camilla, or even Charles himself. Royal artifacts rarely matter because of what they are. They matter because of what they represent, and in this case, the Irish seal may have become a symbol of something much bigger than a ceremonial transfer. It may represent the blueprint for the monarchy's next era. Inside the crown, honors are never empty gestures. They are messages wrapped in tradition, signals sent through history, and quiet instructions about who is trusted to carry the institution forward. That is why this decision has stirred such fascination. It appears to connect ceremony with succession, dignity with strategy, and Catherine's rising role with the long shadow of what comes after Charles. Reports suggest the monarchy is trying to project stability at a time when uncertainty has become impossible to ignore. Charles's health, the pressure on William, the intense public focus on Catherine, and the unresolved tensions around Camilla have all created a fragile atmosphere. In such moments, royal decisions become sharper. A title, a patronage, or a ceremonial duty can suddenly speak louder than any palace statement. By placing Catherine at the center of this historic honor, Charles may have been showing the public that the future is not drifting. It is being prepared, carefully and deliberately, behind the walls of the institution. The connection to William and Catherine is impossible to miss. Together, they represent the next major chapter of the monarchy, and every sign of confidence in one strengthens the position of both. The Irish seal, if truly redirected toward Catherine, becomes part of a broader pattern. The crown drawing its future focal points closer, giving them symbols that carry emotional and historical force and allowing the nation to see continuity before it becomes necessity. That is how monarchy survives difficult times, not through sudden reinvention, but through carefully staged reassurance. The public must feel that while one reign struggles, the next is already taking shape. For Charles, the decision may also be deeply personal. His legacy will not be measured only by the years he reigns, but by what he protects before handing the crown onward. He knows the monarchy cannot afford confusion. It cannot afford competing centers of influence. It cannot afford symbols landing in the wrong hands at the wrong moment. That is why the Irish seal now feels like more than an honor. It feels like a line of succession spoken through ceremony, a quiet declaration that Catherine's is not simply popular, not simply admired, but essential to the crown's emotional and constitutional future. And that is why the moment resonates beyond palace walls. People understand instinctively when power shifts, even when no one says it directly. They sense when a family decision becomes a national message. And as historians begin examining the decision in a broader context, an even more profound legacy starts to emerge. In the end, the story may not be about a seal, a title, or even a palace dispute. It may be about a king confronting the reality of time and deciding which values he wishes to carry forward into the next generation of the crown. For Charles, every symbolic decision now carries a heavier meaning. His reign has unfolded under pressure, with questions about health, unity, public trust, and the future standing at the edge of every royal conversation. That is why the Irish seal matters. It is not merely a historic honor being placed into Catherine's hands. It is a statement about confidence, continuity, and the kind of monarchy Charles may want remembered after the noise fades. Throughout royal history, the smallest gestures have often carried the deepest consequences. A signature, a blessing, a private instruction, a ceremonial appointment each can alter the emotional map of the institution. Reports suggest this decision may be remembered in exactly that way. Catherine's place in the future narrative of the crown has been steadily growing. But this moment appears to give that rise a sharper, more permanent shape. It tells the public that she is not only admired from outside the palace, but trusted within it. And in monarchy, internal trust is the currency that matters most. For Camilla, the debate may continue. Some will argue that expectations around her role were misunderstood. Others will insist that Charles's choice revealed a quiet but unmistakable shift away from the assumptions that once surrounded her ceremonial future. Either way, the conversation has changed. Catherine now stands closer to the center of the royal story, while Camilla's expected influence faces fresh scrutiny. That contrast gives the decision its lasting power. It is success and suffering wrapped into one royal act, Catherine elevated by trust, Camilla shadowed by questions, and Charles caught between loyalty to the present and duty to the future. Historians may revisit this moment for years because it speaks to something larger than family tension. It speaks to how monarchies survive. They survive by choosing continuity over confusion, duty over comfort, and long-term stability over short-term peace. The Irish seal, whether viewed as an honor, a message, or a quiet warning, has become part of that larger struggle. It suggests that the crown is already looking forward, already preparing its next guardians, already deciding which values will endure when today's arguments become tomorrow's footnotes. Because while royal headlines come and go, the decisions that shape a monarchy's future often begin with a single unexpected choice, and this may prove to be one of the most consequential of them all. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.